I know. All right, let's go ahead and get started. And again, welcome to tonight's presentation brought to you by your Pitzer College Office of Alumni and Family Engagement and our Pitzer at Home series. This evening's session is being recorded and will be shared with our community at a later date. I would ask that you please, make sure that you're muted, and I think that we can also have questions via a chat as we go through. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Pamela Jones-Tintel, and I currently serve as the Associate Vice President for College Advancement at Pitzer College. I am also a huge fan of tonight's speaker, who will be discussing the intersection among activism, social justice, and politics. It brings me great pleasure to introduce my amazing friend, activist, feminist, and entrepreneur, Emiliana Guereca. Let me tell you a little bit about Emmy. She is the founder of the Women's March Foundation, which she established in 2016. The Women's March Foundation is a women-led movement bringing together people of all genders, ages, races, cultures, political affiliations, disabilities, and backgrounds to affirm our shared humanity and pronounce our bold message of resistance and self-determination. Emmy is the driving force behind the official women's marches in Los Angeles. She devotes much of her time to advocacy programs for women's rights, Latinx education, and gender equity, and has served as the bridge between community organizations and coalition building that spans national levels. Emmy's most recent endeavor includes launching Women's March Action, the political arm of Women's March Foundation. Personally, Emmy is proud to serve her Latin community and has also built roots in the Jewish community as she raises her family in the Jewish faith. Emmy has been awarded the National Women's Political Caucus Women of Courage Award 2019 for the state of California, Pioneer Women of 2017 Award, the HOPE Latina of the Year Award 2017, LA County Pioneer Women of 2018, and the Pat Brown Institute Civic Engagement Award 2018. To help us kick off tonight's presentation, I believe we have a video to highlight some of this amazing work. Why don't we cue that video? And let's try that again. Why don't we cue that video? There we go. Looks like a small backyard party, right? Amazing. Okay, well, why don't we go ahead and start it? So let's, without further delay, please join me in welcoming my friend Emmy to our Pitzer community.
Hi everyone, I'm Emiliana Guereca, otherwise known as Emmy, which is how Pam knows me. I am the founder of Women's March Los Angeles, and I think we just had a few glitches here, but I'll tell you a little bit about that video. So that video was taken from City Hall, sort of bird's eye view. And it started at about 2 a.m. when we were organizing for Women's March, and you could see one person, 2 people, 5 people, and as you see the crowd grow. I'm like, when I saw that video, I said, there's no way, because I was in the middle of it, and so I didn't get to see all of that. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself and how I started and why I started to organize. So I am an immigrant. My parents brought me to the United States when I was 10. I grew up in Chicago. I grew up in Chicago entrenched in Black culture. I grew up in Cabrini Green. We were some of the very few Latinos at the time living where we lived. And so I've been involved in social justice, and I didn't know it. I've been involved in social justice since I was a kid. When I was 12 and 13, I would actually go help my parents translate to find housing and for housing rights and, you know, for equity, for education for ourselves, because at the time we didn't speak English. My parents definitely didn't either. We just didn't know that it was social justice. So fast forward, and I moved to Los Angeles. I haphazardly also ended up in Los Angeles. I transferred schools from DePaul University to UCLA, and I am the first one to attend university out of my family. I am one of 13 kids. And so when I sent out transfer paperwork and they accepted me, I, you know, was excited, but I then received a letter that said, we are no longer taking out of state students. And what does that even mean? And I'm gonna age myself. This was before email. So I called the admissions office and I said, what does this mean? And I remember her name, Pauline, said, it means that you have to be in state in order for you to attend. This was a Friday afternoon. I said, okay. I said, Mom, I'm heading out to LA because I need to be in state. So needless to say, 3 days later, I was at UCLA ready to attend school, and they told me it didn't work that way. I did not leave that office until they accepted me in that semester, which I fully attended. And now I'm in Los Angeles. Fast forward to why I got involved in social justice, and it started with the 2016 election, which is what most people have started engaging in activism. So the day after the election, I was floored. I really did not know what to do except to organize. So I saw a posting that DC was going to host a march, and I emailed them and I said, people can travel to DC, we're gonna do this in LA. And I'm gonna say that was probably the scariest moment for me, because I sent out an email to my friends and I said, this is what I'm gonna do. And I set out to do it. And so with that, here I am today, almost 4 years later, and continuously working on social justice. And I'm going to talk through a little bit about the 9 issues we currently are working as a country in 2020, this 9 social justice issues, and how they translate into politics and how we can translate them into politics. So if we can cue the PowerPoint. And I want, if you're able to chat and tell me where you're joining us from and any questions you may have along the way. I want to make sure that this is an open conversation, no judgment. We're just having a conversation. So we need to go to the first. This is the last of the slides. We need to go to the first one. Yes, okay. At the intersection of social justice and politics, we're going to discuss what is social justice. Social justice is the concept of fair and just relations between an individual and society as measured by the distribution of wealth, opportunities for personal activity, and social privilege. And then the next slide, we're going to start with really the 9 top issues that we're fighting for and we're looking at in 2020. Once in a while they change in society, but the number one thing right now, according to Pew Research, is voting rights. And voting rights specifically pertaining to voter suppression in the presidential elections. And it depends, different states have different rules. But the number one concern is voting rights. For example, today, the Texas governor restricted the absentee ballot drops to 1 box per county. Imagine 1 box in LA County if you live in LA. And in Missouri, voter suppression looked like if you wanted an absentee ballot, you had to get it notarized. So again, the point of entry is money to get your ballot notarized. So the next one we're looking at is climate justice. And among COVID, it has really increased the viewpoint and where we are. If you live in Los Angeles, you've seen the fires, you've probably, have breathing issues as I did. I felt like I had asthma attacks, but the climate issue, climate justice is the second issue when you speak to people about what it is that they are concerned about. And then the third one being healthcare. So, I mean, if you look at the top 3 in that order, people will talk to you about income inequality and they will talk to you about racial, but their number 1 concern is voting right, climate justice, and healthcare. And as we talk through and we look at what the election looks like, we're looking at maybe abandoning the Affordable Care Act. And what does that look like under COVID, right? So the pandemic has also heightened the awareness of healthcare and the social justice behind it. And then I'll go to the next slide. So then number 4 is the refugee crisis, the refugee or immigrant crisis. That is a concern for a lot of folks in the United States. For example, today the president also talked about slashing or having a new refugee cap of 15,000 per year. And under COVID, it was 10,000. Previous to that, it was 100,000 immigrants. So when we talk about the immigrant and refugee crisis, that has really dominated headlines in 2019 with children at the border. Just recently, the talks of some females that may have gotten hysterectomies they didn't ask for at some of the centers in Georgia. So that's a concern as well. And then when we talk about number 5, which is the racial injustice. When we talk about racial injustice, we talk about the Black Lives Matter protests that took place across the country. And although I'm an organizer with Women's March, and we organized Women's March, our first one was 2017. Before that, 6 years prior to that, Black Lives Matter had organized in Ferguson. Their first real rally was 6 years prior to Women's March. After Women's March, we've had other mobilizations, but the current one that is the biggest across the globe, not just in the United States, has to do with Black Lives Matter and racial justice, with some of the biggest protests on the streets. So that's our 5. And then number 6, when we look at the social justice issue of income gap, again, this is the federal report that in 2018 reports that the income gap is the largest that has been out there since 50 years ago. And I think the COVID-19 pandemic has brought the divide into a bigger scope, right? When we talk about income gap, I'm fortunate to be able to work out of my office, out of my home, but that's not the case for most people. And then this is also when we talk about like education, not every parent can homeschool their child or has the capacity to, bridge that income gap. And then we're talking about the income gap having disparities based on race, gender, and sexuality. And then we go into an even deeper field work of the gender pay gap that still exists. Okay, so I'm gonna go down to 7, 8, 9. I'm gonna be able to share this after in case you wanna go through it. Number 7 was gun violence. That is a huge concern. And now that schools are closed, I think parents, I know I am, for a while we were scared about gun violence in schools. So that's an issue that really, when we talk about mobilizations and social justice, that it's something that was taken on by students. The March for Our Lives students were high school students, and they really were the group that took the MRA on as a social justice issue. Gun violence in schools, gun violence and mass shootings across the nation, especially when gun violence in lower income communities. The March for Our Life kids, I'm gonna say that I'm very proud to actually know them. Emma Gonzalez reached out to me as she found me on the internet as another Latina activist, Googled me. And when we asked what she wanted to do, she said, I want to march in DC. And we said, let's do it. So Women's March has actually been part of a lot of these protests that have been on the streets for social justice. Number 8, hunger and food insecurity. This again is a big issue under COVID that has been really magnified, and how many people live in poverty and with food insecurity. I mean, when we look at our nation, and we are a nation that is always trying to fight hunger in other countries, not realizing that it's in our backyard. The younger generation believes that this is something that needs to be handled. Generation Z believes that poverty and hunger is something that their generation can really take on, which I'm like, yes, that's really what we need. I live not too far from a school where this is something like 20% of the kids were homeless. This is in Los Angeles, in one of the richest counties. And they had food insecurity. And then 9 is something that's dear to me, is gender equity and equality, which is something that this is what I have been fighting for that I'm gonna say my entire life. And when we talk about gender equity and equality, we're talking about equal pay, we're talking about access in the bigger picture for women. We are under the Constitution still not equal. The Equal Rights Amendment has not passed. And so what is the role of women? We still don't have equity. We still do not earn the same amount of money as men. A Latina woman earns 54 cents to the dollar for a white male. And that's just never, that without equity, you do not have equality. So I'll say that, and I'll look to the next one. And I think I have a few of so these are some of the social justice protests that have been engaged from 2017, 18, 19, and 20. So there was the Families Belong Together, which is for kids in cages and immigration and refugee crisis. Women's March is on here as well, which was in 2017, at the time the largest mobilization across the globe. And then we'll go into the next one. And Black Lives Matter, March for Our Lives, and the Climate Justice March. The Climate Justice led by Greta, who is a young woman who's 15, 16 years old, and firmly believes that, again, her generation is getting handed a environment and climate that they will not be able to survive in. So I'm actually really proud that a lot of the youth is taking a lot of these issues on. I don't think I was that aware when I was that young that I would, go out and march. I was out there trying to help my parents and trying to figure out, but I didn't see the bigger picture, where I think Generation X, Generation Z, and the millennials, I know some people talk about, somebody called me a late millennial. I didn't know what that meant, but I think millennials and Generation Z are taking a lot of these issues head on because they're seeing the results of what happens when we don't. And I'll move into the next slide. So out of these social justice and issues and the activism that goes on, the protests that go on, what happens is that we force policy to be changed. We create change, we demand change. For Women's March, after the initial Women's March in 2017, more women ran and won political office than ever. You're talking about House, Senate, you're talking about city councils or even school boards. Women really, really thought that we were being missed. We're 51% of the population, but only 26% in government positions. So that's the other piece. And then for climate justice, that's really slow moving, but the United States exited the Paris Agreement, forcing US cities and local government to respond with their own commitments to climate change. In California, Governor Newsom just recently said that they would phase out gasoline-powered cars by 2035. In California, they banned straws, bags, and although it looks like something that is small, California leads the way in a lot of these social justice movements, and the country takes notice and then continues that. I remember when they introduced the Prius in California, I thought, who is going to drive that? Well, now you go to the Midwest, you go everywhere, and you need an electric car. Almost everyone drives a hybrid car. And then for social justice within the Black Lives Matter movement and what that has done, and protests are still going out daily. I mean, I think we have a long way to go, but the Congressional Black Caucus, in my estimation, was very brave to oppose the police reform set forth by the Republican Party and propose their own police reform bill. So they passed the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, and this is done by Congresswoman Karen Bass, who led the Congressional Black Caucus bill. And Karen Bass was actually someone that grew up in South LA. She is the Congresswoman for District 37, and she was very familiar with that. And so I was very excited to see that she was leading that caucus, because I firmly believe that a lot of these issues also require female leadership, because in my opinion, we've already tried the male leadership model. And so we need to find equity within the political system. So the call was really to end systematic racism in the United States with the bill, and she agrees that there will still be work to be done. And then we're talking about the family separation. So that is still occurring in 2020, and that is a social justice movement that really needs more people in the streets, in all honesty, and more policy. Immigration reform is needed. So I think that's a social justice issue that will be ongoing, like most are ongoing, but with enough volunteerism, with enough advocacy. A lot of these social justice movements turn into policy changes. And so the activism and the protests, some people may think, well, they don't work. You just make a sign and you go out and march, and what does it do? Well, we may not necessarily see it right away, but it's just the entry point. Once you are a participant in a cause and an issue and you continue, you start to see the changes. I originally thought I was gonna organize a march and go back to my life as an entrepreneur, go back to my life with 2 kids, but you can't, because you can't turn away, you can't walk away when you know that these issues still exist and that we need to really, really put forth our energy and our volunteer hours into creating change. And I think this is my last. And then I can open it up to questions. So that's my thought. In order for democracy to work, we must all get involved. Protests and social justice movements are the entry points. to activism and politics. For example, Congresswoman Karen Bass was an activist prior to that. A lot of our politicians really start with advocacy work before they even run for office. I'm going to say that with Women's March Foundation, we currently have 8 volunteers that started as a volunteer with us, whether it was helping us with email or at the march. 8 women total that have run for office and won city council seats, across the country, because it again, once you start with activism, there is no way that you can turn your back on it, because you know that society needs you, and society needs, in order for democracy to work, it needs all of us to participate. And again, protests, social justice movements are an entry point for all of us. So I'm going to open it up to questions, concerns. Again, nothing is off the table, because I firmly believe that you don't know what you don't know. And that's what I'm here for, to answer any questions. Oh, I see a lot of people joining us from a lot of places. Thank you for joining us. Should we open up Q&A?
Yes, and I think, well, first off, thank you, Emmy, for that fabulous overview. You do such an amazing job of capturing such large and sometimes overwhelming ideas, and you got it into, what, a 15-minute PowerPoint, so pretty amazing. I'm going to field one question, but feel free to post things into the chat. And I've got a couple of other questions that we had come up with. So I think the first was, the idea of marching, which is, kind of how you started, if you will, and the challenges of events in a pandemic. What are some ways that people can get involved and make a difference in light of a pandemic and being conscious of social distancing?
So I think, I firmly believe that if you can march with the mask, that you do, but I do think that your health should come first. I think that you should be able to participate in different manners. I think marching under a pandemic is dangerous. I think that when we talk about if our schools are closed and our economy is closed, we probably should not be out there in masses unless you can work out a way that you can stay 6 feet apart and that you can walk through with CDC rules. I think that you are putting yourself in danger, especially if you have any health conditions. But if you have time to volunteer, there are so many things that you can volunteer in, whether it's, text banking for somebody, phone banking. I had my mom make masks on her time and donate them to a hospital. So there's a lot of ways to volunteer outside of marching during COVID.
Thank you. Prior to this call, we were kind of joking of neither of us went to college to be in our current careers. You did touch up a little bit on your background to start off your talk, but can you tell us a little bit more of how those experiences growing up influenced your future endeavors as well as your activism now?
Oh, yes. So, oh my goodness. So I waited tables, to pay for school, and that's where I met my husband as well. So I was waiting tables where I met my husband. But I think, I worked different jobs. I'm an entrepreneur. I started an event production company and then a film production company. I think my biggest strength and my biggest weakness is that I say yes. That I'm like, you're under budget for this film? Yes, I'll help you on it. But I think what has really helped me has been the work ethic that my parents really instilled in me. I mean, my parents worked 2-3 jobs, you know, 6-7 days a week, and whenever we could, we would go and help them, you know, as kids. And I think that's really part of the immigrant experience, is really the work ethic. I mean, and when I talk about fighting for equal pay forever, I mean, I was the young kid that asked my parents to pay me for housework because they were paying my brother for yard work. Why was I not getting paid? And eventually my dad was like, oh, just give her $5, let us be. So I've been really always cognizant of the fact that women make less money. And I think part of it is because we don't say anything, we accept it, or my dad called me the squeaky wheel gets the grease. So we must always ask for what is right, what is righteous, what is just. And for me, it's always been about equity.
Thank you. And I so appreciate your acknowledgement of the importance of education. I myself am a first gen. My father has a grade school education and my mom had a high school education, and it was truly life-changing for me. And again, it's sort of, you'd have to take the journeys and the twists and the paths to end up where we are. So thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely. I think education is a game changer. It's generational wealth. Education is definitely a game changer. And for me, being the first one out of a huge family now opened up the doors for everyone after me and my sister's kids, because now someone had already opened that door. Someone had already graduated university and it wasn't so impossible. So I think education is really key into achieving any of your dreams. I mean, I didn't go to school for activism, but everything I learned along the way has helped me.
As I keep telling folks, we need places like Pitzer now more than ever. So again, so important. You touched upon this also earlier in your talk about the differences between the way women and men lead. Can you expand a little bit more about that on some of those nuances?
Well, I think the difference between, I think women are more collaborative. I find that, you know, we find a way to get it done, but to bring everyone sort of together and figure out how to move forward. I think that women, also women that are really ask for what they want, are viewed as the B word. But if a man says the same exact thing, a man is viewed as leadership. He took leadership. So that's one of the aspects of it. But I do think that women really work towards collaboration. I also think that under COVID, in all honesty, under COVID, I think that women are going to get left behind in the workforce again. I think that women are handling a lot under COVID, from kids to household to work, all in the same amount of time. So I think that, you know, if you are a woman that is, you know, thinking, oh my goodness, how am I going to do this? I think that you really need to sit down and ask for that parity of, you know, will the husband help you? Will someone around you help you? And the other thing I think that women don't ever think about is going back to school when they're older. I signed up for courses because I thought, okay, I would love to go back to school, and what better time than COVID when everything is online? I don't have to drive. So I think for women, really, yes, education, but also asking for what you want upfront and knowing that you're worth it, that you can work through anything, and just seeing yourself equal. But also, I'm going to say we need allies. We need the men to also help us stand up, because it isn't something that is just women need to work on it. I think it's also equity, and gender equity happens with both male and female working towards it.
Absolutely. You know, early on in your career, as you referenced, you had a special events business, and then got involved with the Women's March. And when can you reflect back on that experience? Because you know, I don't think I visited you at that time, but you know, was it like, you know, did you ever expect it to get that massive and successful?
So I think I'll say what my husband said to me, which says, Emmy, your family doesn't know how to do things small. You're one of 13 kids. I was like, I guess I'll agree.
Okay.
So I started an event production company that built out street festivals and then concerts. And even then I grew it to a larger company. And then, you know, when I started organizing Women's March, I really started to reach out to those that I knew. And you know, when someone says, oh, they came out of nowhere. No, we didn't. We didn't come out of anywhere. We actually had years of having worked in the entertainment industry when people thought, how did A-listers join? Well, some of them knew me, and then some of them called their friends. But also aside from it, I brought the experience of knowing how to build out events, knowing how to permit for the city. And the other one is that my degree was in mass media communication, so I knew how to market the program. So that was a whole other aspect that I didn't even realize was needed to create this really big social justice movement. And I do want to say that after Women's March, we have really helped almost every movement out there that wants to organize, from Black Lives Matter to climate justice to you know, March for Our Lives. So part of what we are doing is making sure that we really are on the ground and helping that new activist, that new organizer that wants to be an advocate for an issue or cause.
Well, I always like to say, because no one's perfect, right? And I like to say that the biggest mistake you can make is not learning from your mistakes. Can you talk about any mistakes or hindsight 2020 that you wish you would have done differently with any of your work that you do and initiatives?
Yes, definitely. I think at the beginning, I didn't really know how big it was going to get or how much time it would take. I think that I would have taken more time to think if I wanted to build it at the scale. I think one of the things that really I lost along the way was my privacy. And that was not something that I expected to lose. I didn't think that people would be reaching out to me, possibly trying to protest at my house, or just plain not liking me, right? So I think in hindsight, I would have asked for more help of more people around me. But it was something that I was not prepared to take on. I'll just say it. I think I kind of ignored it, like, oh, I have like 5,000 friend requests. I don't know these people. I'll say yes. So, yes. So I think part of it is I would have asked for more help. I think I would have really should have leaned into some of the people that have already worked through this, which I have now in hindsight, 3 years later, I really think it's a lot. But again, it's not something that I can just walk away from. As an immigrant, as a person that really thinks I'm living the American dream, really, because this is why my parents moved to the United States, to give us a better life. So I think it's my way of giving back to the community. And it does, hindsight, yes, I should have reached out to Dolores Huerta earlier. I should have reached out to Gloria Steinem earlier for really some of that advice that they have given me in the past year on how to handle a lot of the issues that arise, especially now during the social media age, because I think everything is so again, blown up on social media. People are looking for the likes, people are looking for certain things, and I think social media is a little bit overhyped. Dolores Huerta is the one that's like, why are you even on Facebook? And I said, who works on your Facebook? She said, my daughter. But, you know, I just think that I landed sort of in a space where I'm okay with being a little more public. I mean, my husband and my parents will always tell you that they're like, she's a hermit, like she doesn't even come out. But it's work that I have to continue, that I must continue, because I think society needs it, especially now. I think that we all need to, you know, look back and think, okay, how was I feeling under COVID? You know, what was out there that was inspiring me? How was I taking care of myself, right? And so I think for me, it's really a critical point that we have to be there for our society during these times.
Let's reverse that question. What has been some of the keys to your success?
I will say that I'm focused, that I'm saying no to more things. I will say that really work ethic, and it's something that was taught early on by my parents. I probably am a little tough on my two boys because I expect them to have the same work ethic, and they're looking at me like, I finished all my homework. I'm like, nope, all the extra credit must be done as well. So I think the work ethic, I also think that my husband is part of the success. I think that my husband has really stepped up for me in ways that I didn't even know I needed, right? So my husband is, what do you need? Just before this, Emmy, do you need coffee? I was like, yes, I need coffee. You know, so, and then the people around me that really have said, how can we help? What can we do? I mean, I've had people come out to register people to vote, to mobilize people with me and feel like, okay, I can do my small part. I've also seen some incredible resilience. So I think the key to my success is really that group of people that are around me. And it's not big, it's really small, because I'm not, people may think I'm a public person, but I have a small group around me, and they keep me centered, and they help me when I need help, but they also pull me back when I need to be pulled back. So I appreciate that.
All right. Let's maybe touch upon something, a big thing that happened this week, the presidential debate, right? Do we even talk about that? Or
let's do it.
All right. It's what were your thoughts? I think I've been very speechless of just how can that be happening? How did that happen?
I think it has been happening for the past 4 years. And I think, again, under COVID, it's been magnified. I honestly was like, someone put a mask on him, like just, you know, something. But I think, you know, I think we are at a time where we are looking for leadership, where we are looking for not necessarily answers to everything, but really leadership, someone that has empathy for us as a society, for us as a democracy. And I think both candidates had their issues. I needed to learn more about policy and how we're going to move forward. I think that we as a society need to demand more from our politicians. And most people are like, oh, we thought you were anti-Trump or all of this. I'm for democracy. I am for really, really living in a democracy. And what we are experiencing right now is so anti that. You know, so and if we're headed into another 4 more years of what we're experiencing, I'm not sure how we get through that. I think when we wake up, it's breaking news and it's something negative, and it continues to be negative. But I also think that, you know, the American people should demand the truth. I think that we've been lied the past 4 years, and the debates was nothing different. And so I think that we should definitely demand the truth, but also demand democracy, because that's who we are as a country. That's why everybody wants to be here. It isn't to live under a dictatorship. It isn't to live under lies. I mean, that was a train wreck. That was a train wreck. I produced a bingo card where I was like, I'm so glad I wasn't a drinking game. But I think we really need to move beyond just ideas and whatnot. We need to look at policy. What are these candidates bringing to the table? What are they bringing to really bridge those gaps of income inequality? I mean, I was looking at someone talking about the minimum wage, and I'm like, why is there even a minimum wage? Why can't there be a living wage, right? When we talk about, racial injustice, I mean, just at this debate on the stage, when, white supremacy question was asked and it couldn't be answered, you can't denounce that, then you stand for it. So I think it's time that we demand more from our politicians. We demand truth, and we demand that that we work towards solutions and not these ideas that are pie in the sky.
Agreed.
Also the moderators. I mean, the moderators need to help move it along. Yeah.
I do. But this moderator is doing awesome, right? I'll take that, right? There we go.
Yes, female moderator. Maybe that's what we need. We need a female moderator.
Yes. I want to encourage folks to please ask any questions in the chat, but I will keep going. In preparation for today's session, we were talking about Pitzer President Melvin Oliver's launch of a racial justice initiative. From your perspective, why is it important for educational institutions like Pitzer to be doing such initiatives?
I think it's important for racial justice to be part of education. I think that it is something that hasn't been talked about. I mean, I didn't grow up talking about racial justice. I just knew that there was injustice. But then if you don't know enough about it, how do you fix it, right? So that's part of the issue. I was talking through, I had a neighbor pull me aside and say, hey, Amy, can I discuss something with you? And I said, yeah. And so she wanted to discuss racism. And I said, okay, I say yes. So her biggest question was, I knew that it existed, but I don't really know how to move forward with it. It's sort of uncomfortable. And so I really feel like, the initiative of really talking through and teaching in an education setting on racial justice and racial injustice is critical for us. It's critical for the United States. Again, I saw that it was launched this summer, and I'm like, we need more of that. We really do, because we should not be really being informed about racial injustice based on just media and the idea that we know about Black Lives Matter because people are being killed at a different rate than white people. That just shouldn't be, right? But so then we do need it to be part of education in order for all of us to be part of the solution, because you cannot fix racial injustice with just Black people fix it, just brown people fix it. It takes all of us to fix it.
Absolutely. Again, opening it up for any more questions. Otherwise, maybe let me ask, I lied, one more question then. Is there something that we should have asked that I haven't asked yet?
I think we've asked everything, but I do want to talk about, I have Natalia with me, and she is dropping links for volunteer opportunities. I do want to talk about, all of the issues that we are facing in 2020, and people sort of feel a little bit hopeless, but I do think that volunteering and finding that cause that is close to your heart is a way to do it, especially under COVID. So she's dropping links. Also voting, most people say, well, my vote doesn't matter, I live in California. Actually, it does, especially for local government. If you saw what was going on during the fires, it was the governor that was out there. It was the mayors that were out there. So I think a lot of times people think, well, it's just federal policy and local government doesn't matter. But local government, I think, is key. So she's dropping links. Election is November 3rd. We want to have a major turnout. So check your, if you're voting absentee ballots, she's dropped links. If you don't know if you're registered to vote, I had a friend just tell me yesterday, I forgot I got married. I didn't re-register and I moved counties. I'm like, here's the link. So yeah, so she's dropping links for that. And if you would like to volunteer or have any further questions on anything, I mean, feel free to reach out.
Excellent, excellent. Well, and I will also acknowledge I neglected to introduce Natalia earlier, a member of your team from the Women's March Foundation. So thank you, Natalia, for helping out tonight. And also some members of the engagement team, Brooke Butler, a great member trying to do a lot of the techie stuff behind the scenes. So thank you, Brooke, as well as Pitzer graduate Jill Hawthorne. I had a moment there. Jill Hawthorne, who's a proud graduate of Pitzer. So again, thank you so much for all of your help behind the scenes. Emmy, thank you. Oh, yes.
I have someone asking if we're marching October 17th. Oh, yes. So I'm going to say that in Los Angeles, we are not organizing a march. We are organizing a text bank, virtual text bank, to reach 15 million women on October 17 and 18 to make a plan to vote. Statistically, historically, women have a higher turnout as a voter since the 19th Amendment passed. So a little bit of history there, but so we are not marching in Los Angeles. We firmly believe that we should be cautious. We've had over 200,000 deaths with COVID. So we want to make sure that we are not marching. In DC, they will be marching on October 17th. So Natalia has put in the links for that activity. We currently have 55,000 people registered to help us reach out. So I'm super excited. We just launched that initiative yesterday. So I hope you will join us.
Amazing. Well, Emmy, even though you're trying to do more of saying no, I so appreciate from the bottom of my heart that you did not tell me no and tell Pitzer no, and that you are here tonight. So thank you so much for participating in our Pitzer at Home session. And as you referenced, please, for participants, please consider getting involved with the womensfoundation.org by visiting any of those links that Natalia added to the chat. And also, please consider getting involved with Pitzer. A friendly reminder that your Pitzer Office of Alumni and Family Engagement is committed to providing resources to assist, educate, and entertain as we continue navigating these unprecedented times. We hope you will continue to stay active and mindful of your Pitzer community, and we look forward to seeing you again at a future Pitzer at Home activity. Privita Futuri. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Good night, everyone. Thank you for having me.
Great. Good night.